Today I'm installing a transfer case drop kit on this 98 Jeep Wrangler. I recently started getting driveline vibrations. This happened when I took off the hardtop and a roof rack that I had on it. I think it raised the suspension probably an inch or two in the rear by eliminating that weight. I didn't have any problems prior to that, but it's starting now, so by eye it looks like it's riding higher to me. Usually this is needed, or at least it's an option. If you get driveline vibrations from the rear drive shaft after installing a lift, as you can see, this Jeep is lifted. There's quite a bit of clearance between the 31-inch tires and the fender flare. I'm getting driveline vibrations. I picked up an Old Man Emu transfer case drop kit. It comes with these 6 spacers, one for each bolt that's on the transfer case skid plate. This is the transfer case skid plate. It comes with bolts, and then it comes with these little sleeves to put on the bolts. Basically adapts it to fit the skid plate, because there's a taper on the bolts where they go into the skid plate. If you live in a rusty area and these bolts have never been touched, don't turn them too hard. What happens is there's a little, it's called a nutsert inside the frame that these bolts thread into. And in rusty areas, the bolts can seize up and end up just spinning out the nutsert. So it doesn't actually come out of the frame, but it just starts spinning. So be aware that that may happen to you. I know this isn't going to happen to me because I replaced this whole part of the frame, and the nutserts were also replaced at the same time. So getting to work. We're going to use a 3/4 inch socket to take out the bolts. So the way I'm going to do this may or may not be the right way, but the right way to support and move this around. But I've done this plenty of times before, and it's worked out just fine for me. So I'm going to take the floor jack over here. I'm going to slide that up under the skid plate, jack it up so it's just touching, so it supports it. And then I'll throw a couple jack stands under there just as a catch. Explain what I mean once I get to that point. Then I'm going to go around and loosen all 6 of the bolts. So we're going to loosen the other side, just maybe a 1/4 inch unscrewed, so that when we take these bolts out, the skid plate can pivot. If we don't loosen those up, then it's just going to be bolted to the frame and it's not going to pivot. So I'll get that set up and be right back. Alright, we're back. A little tip, knees and concrete don't go well together. So if you spend any significant amount of time, even a little amount of time on concrete kneeling, that can destroy your knees later in life. So definitely find something soft to kneel on. I just use this junk old life jacket that I had laying around. I got knee pads that I wear sometimes, but definitely protect those knees. Anyway, we got the bolts out. The other side I loosened. You can see I've got the floor jack here supporting the skid plate, and the jack stand is underneath as a kind of emergency catch if the jack fails. However, I am not putting any part of my body underneath this skid plate at any point in time because it's just not necessary. You might as well avoid all potential risks. So now what I need to do is lower the skid plate from the frame, just enough to slip in one of these pucks. So about a 1/2 inch or so. Also, I'd like to note that sometimes you can just use washers to do this. Don't need the actual spacers. So, got 1, 2, 3. Now I'll just center them up with the holes. Put these new bolts in, tighten them up, and move on to the other side. Very quick, easy job, as long as the bolts aren't rusty. If the bolts that you're taking out are rusted to the frame, this is probably going to turn into a nightmare for you, because if you don't have the tools to cut and weld the frame, most likely you're going to need to pay somebody to do that. So if we look past the terrible weld on the rock sliders here, we can see that the spacer kit is now installed. I have both sides on and they're both torqued down. I don't have a specific torque value. I've kind of been doing this long enough that I can just feel by hand whether they're tight enough or not. Can probably find a torque value online somewhere on a Jeep forum or something like that if you look for it. I will go ahead and re-tighten these after 100 miles or 200 miles just to make sure they're not loosening up, because I have seen in the past where sometimes these bolts, after they've been removed, can loosen up and just fall out. So I will double check that. I didn't end up having to, but if the bolts going through to the frame don't end up lining up after dropping down the skid plate, it may be necessary to come underneath and loosen up 4 nuts holding the transmission mount to the skid plate. Just loosen them up enough so that the skid plate can slide forward and back. If it's too tough to move by hand, ratchet straps are always helpful, or a come along. Just be aware of what you're doing and how much force you're putting on parts, and what could possibly go wrong. But anyway, that's the install. I'm going to take for a ride now just to verify that that was my problem, and it should be. Should cure most drive shaft related vibrations due to lift height, such as this. So I hope this video was helpful. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.